Hello and welcome to this video on maximum and minimum pricing schemes. In this video we're going to look at first of all minimum price scheme, then a maximum price scheme, and discuss a couple of examples of these schemes. So let's start off with minimum pricing. Okay, so we're going to be talking about minimum pricing first of all, and this is a scheme that tries to solve a particular problem. And the problem we're trying to solve here is the problem of negative externalities. So what we can see here in the diagram, so when we look at our negative externality diagram, is that effectively the price at which the free market equilibrium is operating is too low. And from society's perspective, what we would like is a higher price, and that would reduce the level of consumption. So goods such as cigarettes and alcohol have negative externalities. Governments may attempt to raise the price of these things to a level where the marginal social cost and the marginal social benefit are equal to try and cause a reduction in consumption or production. Now this is often called a guaranteed minimum price scheme, and this is the way in which it works. Let's imagine that we have our free market. We have demand and supply, and the current market price is PE. But the government have said that price is too low and is leading to too much being produced. And so we want consumption to move back in the opposite direction. What the government can do is they can pass a law that says the price is not allowed to drop below a certain level. And let's imagine they price a law where they say the price, it is illegal to sell this particular item, alcohol or cigarettes, for lower than the price P min. Now let's have a look at the impact. What does this do for this market? Well, first of all, if we consider the level of demand, if we look along the demand curve, we see that the level of demand will move to point A from point E. At this higher price, less is demanded, so only Q1 is being consumed. So to a certain extent, we have addressed the problem here that the amount consumed has moved from QE down to Q1. If less is being consumed, we have less of the negative externalities resulting. However, if we look at it from the point of view of the supplier now knows they can get the price P min. So what does this mean? Actually, the supplier extends supply to B, and there'd be an incentive for them to produce Q2. So what we have here is a market that is not in equilibrium. We have less being consumed and less externalities, but we also have the situation where there's excess supply. We have alcohol or cigarettes that are potentially being created by firms because they're willing to do so now at this higher price of P min, the minimum price. So a minimum price scheme, governments can introduce a minimum price, and our definition here of a minimum price is this is where goods cannot be sold at a price below this, and that's enforced by the law. The advantage of this is a minimum price will discourage the consumption of a good, so it addresses those negative externalities. However, we must bear in mind that excess supply may result, and this excess supply, something needs to be done with it. It may find its way back onto the market via the black market at lower prices, so through the sort of unofficial, illegal markets where it may be being sold at a price that's lower than the legal price at which this can be sold at. So here we have a positive and a negative of this approach. Now there's been lots of talk in many news outlets about introducing a price for a minimum unit price for alcohol. Scotland is a good example where there's been lots of talk about this. And here's some stats from the campaign from a couple of focus groups on alcohol and the Medical Association in Scotland about some of the benefits of introducing a minimum price for alcohol in Scotland. Now, market failure can also result if people can't afford to buy basic necessities such as food and housing. These goods have positive externalities in their consumption. They have lots of external benefits through providing stable environments and people not resulting in using crime and all sorts of things like this. Now, a maximum price may help solve this situation. If you have a situation where people can't afford to buy things that have positive externalities because the price is too high, the government could pass a law saying, by law, the price for these items cannot go above a certain amount. Let's again look at the analysis that would show us the impact here of a guaranteed maximum price. So here we have the demand and supply for a particular product. Let's maybe consider this housing or flats. And the rent of a flat would be at price PE if it was left to the free market, and the quantity of flats that would be occupied would be QE. Now the government might say that PE actually is too high, and what we want really is a reduction in the price of renting a flat so that it's fairer. Now, the impact of that is they could say we'll pass a law saying the price cannot go above P max by definition. Okay, it'd be illegal for you to rent out a flat at higher than the price P max. Let's have a look at the impact of that on the market. What will happen to demand? Well, actually, we might see an increase in demand because now rents are cheaper at P max than they were at PE. People who are living at home might now decide, actually, at this price, I'm willing to rent. So there'll be an extension in demand to position B. And this would help solve the problem potentially of getting more people into flats. But the problem is when we look at supply, at this lower price, there is a disincentive to supply as much. Supply we'd expect to contract and only fewer properties be made available for rent, or people might sell their properties instead. So in this situation, we have a problem of excess demand. We have not as much supply of flats and now more people who want to rent a flat because the market cannot clear here. It's kept in disequilibrium and the price can't adjust to PE. It's artificially held at Pmax by the law. So a maximum price scheme, governments could introduce a maximum price scheme where goods cannot be sold at a price above this. So let's make sure we've got this down in our notes. A maximum price may be set to encourage consumption of a particular good. So a maximum price for a degree, a maximum price for a vaccination, a maximum price for renting a flat. On the flip side, however, this may result in excess demand and shortages. Max prices can sometimes lead to goods being traded on the black market, or people find ingenious ways to get around having a maximum price for rent. Like your rent is 1,000 euros, but also you have to give me 2 gold bars. So for an example of this, we might turn to the United States, where there are a number of states here indicated in yellow that have rent controls, and this means there is a maximum rent that can be charged for certain blocks of flats in certain areas. As you can see, though, the majority of states don't have any rent controls. So in this video, we've seen what is meant by a minimum price scheme, a maximum price scheme, and then discussed a couple of examples of these. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.